You've been looking forward to visiting with Clif High of Half Past Human, and he's got, as George Ure calls it, the rickety time machine up in the northwest part of the world, where they do some pretty exciting stuff with linguistics and the future and forecasting and stuff. And well, Mr. High, thanks for getting up early for us.
Well, actually, I was awake anyway, so it's not a problem.
Oh, you get up early and crank up the rickety time machine, do you?
Exactly. I'm one of those people who's usually at work by about 5:30 to 6, something like that.
Yeah. And what's going on up the northwest? Anything exciting? Nice weather?
No, raining at the moment, so nice weather. Yeah, it's our typical going into the tunnel, we call it, because around October we start getting clouds that pretty much sit over us and drizzle us or rain on us or storm on us until about end of March, first part of April, something in that area.
Now, your main website is Half Past Human, and explain to folks who have never heard about Half Past Human of what your main focus is, and explain how you do this amazing work.
Sure. Basically, we operate on the theory that everybody is psychic to some degree, whether they are aware of it or not. And even if they are aware that they're psychic, they may not be aware of every psychic impression that comes through their mind. But we think that those psychic impressions leak out in their day-to-day conversations in the choice of words that they make that are different from their usual lexicon. So everybody on the planet has a usual weekly lexicon or group of words that they would use that would be from 11,000 words to 20,000 words, depending on their expertise and the demands of their work.
Mm-hmm. And
when people step outside of that usual lexicon, because they may know 100,000 words or more, it's just interesting. What motivated them to choose this word in response to a question about an ordinary subject as opposed to some other word? And so we think that what's going on is that the psychic impressions are being leaked out in their choices of words, and we go on out, I actually have software that does it all, that scoops out hundreds of millions of words out of the internet, and we just sort of compress them and put them through these various different processing and boil them down to a thick syrupy mass, and then we start looking at them from an archetype level, and we're able to make forecasts based on how the language is changing on a sort of a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So it's the change in language that allows us to do the forecast, not the
change.
Actual words.
Now, how do you know what's changed? For example, I don't know. Let's just take one individual like Patrick. How does your software, Clif High, know what Patrick is using in the form of different words over the last couple of months? How would you know that?
Well, we wouldn't, and we wouldn't really care. It works the other way. We wouldn't care what Patrick says because we don't care what individuals say, but we care what is being said. So, for instance, you're just an avid dahlia gardener. You just love them flowers.
Right.
And so you're always writing on the internet about your dahlias. But in a week-to-week basis, the language you use will shade and tend to change, and we'll pick it up because we'll go out and read a bunch of language, and we'll have all these words associated with dahlias. And then the next time we read the words and we have new words associated with dahlias, we say, aha, there's a difference here. Why is that? What does this mean?
So if I were psychic and knew that, there was going to be a big flood in central Texas, and I just kind of knew it on my soul level, if you will, and subconsciously I knew it, and I was kind of preparing myself for it, I may use words that will tip you guys off.
Correct. You would, in fact, we would basically find that even if you were psychic and didn't know it, nonetheless, under those circumstances, say that a week out or whatever was the range of your psychic ability, you would suddenly, or you wouldn't suddenly, but you'd start shifting over into sets of words that related to the archetype of the flood. And so there'd be a lot of uses of words around water and associated water themes and so on. And it's not quite as straightforward as you using the word flood, but you may use inundate in a conversation about something that doesn't really technically involve water, but nonetheless the word inundate would be there, like, in a sense, I was inundated by the pollen from the dahlias. That kind of thing, right?
Really?
As opposed to I was covered by the pollen from the dahlias. And it's those sort of subtle, that's a rather blatant one, but there are shifts like that give us the indication as to which way the things are going to go. And so if we suddenly start seeing a lot of language about inundation and floating and covered by water, blanketed by water, etc., we get into all these archetypes when they're all collected into as I say, a thick syrupy mass of several millions. It makes an impression on us when we're looking at it and we say, aha, flood coming.
Let's invite the listeners in. 888-663-6386. 888-663-6386. We'll put you on hold, and you'll be able to hear the program on hold, and then we'll just pick it up live. We have emails, patrick@oneradionetwork.com. Well, what if Patrick were so psychic to the ability that he kind of knew there was going to be a flood consciously? And then I start saying to my neighbors on my little chat or whatever, my blog, I'm really going to get to higher ground and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to put away food. What does that do to what your machine picks up?
Well, it doesn't really alter anything. It's through that conscious level of word use, it's not really possible to influence what we do. Because, for instance, there's always conversations about people going to high ground for one reason or another in some part of the planet. There's always conversations about storing food. So you may have actually, because you've got the idea of the flood coming, you may have actually been motivated to speak a bit more about it, so there might be a little bit more verbiage about those two subjects. But unless it was millions of Patricks, it's not really going to show up as an impact on our work.
It's not going to show up, like you say, unless there was a lot of people that were
correct.
talking about
Bear
it.
in mind that a typical report for us runs about 50 pages, more or less. And that 50 pages is composed of the boiling down perhaps 100 to 110 or 120 million reads.
Wow.
Each read will bring back around 2,000 to 5,000 words, depending on what's available at the time that it found its keyword from which it's doing that read. So we're truly working on the order of 500 and 600 million words to start with that we, as I say, eventually boil down and look at and then produce a 50-page report. So it would be very difficult to be able to skew our stuff deliberately or inadvertently. There are a couple of conditions that can cause this, and we have filters in place that usually watch out for that.
Now, Clif, your latest report that you refer to, you all changed your paradigm where it's a real affordable. What is it, like $10 now?
$10 for the
cool.
last shape of the things to come. Yes.
And that came out a couple of weeks ago.
September 15th.
Yeah.
Yes.
September 15th, shape of the things to come, and I think you're going to do another one, maybe 3 or 4 months.
Correct.
But folks can get this entire report, and this is how you guys support yourself on halfpasthuman.com, right?
Correct.
halfpasthuman.com. Let's take some calls here. What's your first name? Where are you calling from? Hello?
Hello?
Hi, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, Cliff. I wanted to ask you about the revolution. When does it start, the bullets flying, so to speak?
Bullets flying?
Well, I can't say that exactly when will be the shot heard around the world, but I suspect because we're getting a lot of words around oppression, repression, and suppression from the powers that be in January, February, they've got to have some kind of a trigger response to be oppressive too. So if I was a betting kind of fellow and figured on odds, I would say, well, the odds seem to be sometime in January, February, and probably related to a very harsh incident around the swine flu or something of that ilk. It's going to depend, though, on whether or not the Israelis actually attack Iran before that period of time, because if they do, then the froth becomes quite whipped up, and we may indeed see fighting incidences here in the U.S. In late December.
Caller, do you perceive with the way you feel about things and your intuition that there is going to be some kind of quote unquote revolution more than we see now against the powers that be?
No, I've just things I've been the news following Clif's reports. The other thing that I'm kind of worried about is the death of the dollar. I'm not sure. I know Clif has talked about the death of the dollar from this November to next November, and that our relationship with the government is going to be completely different. Is that going to? Is that what triggers the end of the United States, or a change in how our government is?
That would be a word, transformation. I'm not going to say the United States ends. I don't think that's necessarily the case. We're going to be transformed. There's no question about it. And I think that the dollar pressure alone would not cause the dollar pressure is going to be severe. I mean, people are going to be starving on the planet. There's no question about this. Maybe 1.2 billion people will die as a more or less direct result of the dollar dying. And that's at a planetary level.
Wow. And when do you are forecasting this?
Well, they're not all going to die in a single day. I mean, they're starting to die already, and then the process will continue over the next year or so as the dollar dies. Because bear in mind, as the dollar dies, big pharma won't be shipping pharmaceuticals anymore. Healthcare system's going to break down. Quality of food's going to go. Hygiene's going to go. People are going to be displaced and in stressful situations from which they won't be able to make appropriate decisions, and it goes on and on and on. Plus, we have a very horrific situation. 6.5 billion people on the planet, more or less, 2 billion people every day try and exist on $2 a day. When the dollar collapses, those 2 billion people will face a double problem. The first is their $2 a day is going to be reduced to less than $1 a day, and then they're also going to be joined by another 2 billion trying to survive on less than $1 a day. Many of these people will be in the developed world, and they won't know how to do it.
Thank you for the call. You know, Cliff, it's very interesting because our money man, Andrew Goss, who's here every Wednesday morning and who's been studying these things for about 30 years, I mean, he's certainly, you know, is in line with what you're saying as far as the dollar losing about 50% of its value over the next 6 months to a year. Because he really believes that that's when all of this new money that's being printed and then borrowed by the Treasury is going to be sloshing back into the system.
I would agree with that, yes.
Very interesting.
But the 50% issue, I don't know if that's pertinent, because the way that we look at things from an emotional viewpoint, there's a, if you will, the edge of a cliff, and we'll walk on up to it, a precipice, and we'll fall over that. And after that, it doesn't really matter whether there's a, quote, floor under the dollar in the basket sense at any given number or not. So in other words, the idea that the dollar would stop its loss at 60 or 40 or something is immaterial, because the damage will be done once that confidence erodes. And yes, it'll take a whole year for the confidence to finally go in the U.S., but it'll be very much akin to the loss of confidence in the government of Argentina, and thus the loss of confidence in their currency, which occurred back in the year 2000. In our case, it'll be the reverse. We'll lose confidence in the currency, and then we'll lose confidence in the dollar, in the government that supports it.
It's 15 after the hour. My name is Patrick Timpone with Clif High. We're here live every morning, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central Time, and every Wednesday, Andrew Goss. So if you're interested in the financial stuff, this gentleman's really cool. Secret World of Money he wrote, and Uncle Sam Cooke's the books, which actually predicted this whole current great financial crisis, whatever the hell you want to call it, about 4 or 5 years ago. Let's go to more calls. Which first name were you calling from?
Hey, it's Sean from Ohio.
Sean, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, first of all, I'd like to say that I think Mr. High should get a Nobel Prize for his work.
Thanks, but that's pretty scary.
Well, it's not the politics behind it, but just the level of commitment. And I also want to say that I've heard Mr. High state many times that this is an emotionally draining work for him to engage in. And I want to let him know that for every person, you know, that calls in and asks a question or thanks him for his work, you know, there's a lot of us out here who are silent, but we really appreciate your efforts to try and help us become more aware and smarter.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's probably the only thing that keeps me going is that, oh no, there's